I'd like to call this October 13, 2022 regular Board of Education meeting to order. I was going to say Mr. Anagnastu. Mr. Anagnastu's replacement, would you please take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Here.
Ms. Kilbane?
Here.
Mr. Micko?
Here.
Ms. Stovchek?
Here.
And Mrs. Hausen?
Here.
We are all present. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on our agenda is our district goals. Our district goals remain the same: academic achievement and growth, financial prudence, and community engagement. And all the decisions we make are measured by those three goals. I do have public comment. Jess Koza. You've done this before, Jess. You know the drill. You have approximately 3 minutes.
I am Jess Koza, and I'm at 9812 Hazelwood Avenue. If you have been following the State Board of Ed news, a resolution to reject Title IX language that would protect LGBTQ plus students from discrimination was on the agenda for a vote. It's called the Resolution to Support Parents, Schools, and Districts in Rejecting Harmful, Coercive, and Burdensome Gender Identity Policies. And you can imagine what it does contain, but some of the things are rejecting the existence of trans identity, passing legislation to require teachers and school staff to out their trans youth. 154 people submitted written testimony, 35 in support of the resolution, 65 against. This resolution has been sent to the executive committee as of yesterday. I was reviewing a lot of the public testimony, and I would like to read to you one commentator whose words I related to the most. And sometimes someone else puts your feelings and your perspective into better words. So this is not my quote, this is someone else's. First, you don't have to understand all of it. You don't have to understand all of the terminology. You don't have to understand all of the feelings. It's okay if it feels so new that it makes you a little uncomfortable. I understand that this part, the part where kids take a path their parents didn't expect, is difficult for many folks, especially parents, but sometimes understanding takes time and mutual trust, both of which can exist without a little bit of open-mindedness. Second, there are going to be people who try to exploit your discomfort. They'll weaponize your love for your children by trying to scare you with misinformation and unfounded accusations. But I encourage you to think about who it is that they're actually painting as the villains today: kids. These are kids who are just starting to figure themselves out, figuring out who they want to be, something that many adults are still trying to do. Everyone deserves grace, patience, and trust, including our youth. Bullying or villainizing kids isn't helping or protecting anyone. And third, youth are entitled to their own identity. Kids think as though they are nothing more than the property of their parents, subject to total parental control at all times. This is not a healthy way to view children. Kids ultimately are little adults in the making. They may not know everything, even though they think they do. But they do know something. They may not have the same legal rights as adults, but they are certainly entitled to basic anatomy. And someday, when they're adults too, they will remember, just like you and I do, who trusted them and who did not, who made them feel safe. Often, it is the tiny things that make the difference. Trusting a young person's name, pronouns, and understanding of themselves will now prepare them for who they will be in the future. And that's all.
I appreciate your comments, Jess. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is approval of minutes. We have the August 1st, 2022 Board of Education meeting and the September 22nd, 2022 Board of Education meeting. All video and audio recordings are a permanent part of the minutes and available on our website. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stavcek. Any discussion? Mr. Mancini, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stovcek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Kilbane,
Yes.
and Mr. Micko.
Yes, and the motion carries. Next, we have Treasurer's Report, and Mr. Mancini's pinch hitting. So if you'd like for the public record, if you could introduce yourself and tell us why you're here.
Okay, I'm Nick Mancini, the Assistant Treasurer here. George, our Treasurer, is on vacation for this weekend, so I am going to do my best to fill in.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have several items for your consideration this evening. First is the financial reports for the month ending September 30th, 2022, which can be found in Exhibit A. We'll start off with actual compared to forecast variance and net favorability analysis. So current year-to-date revenue collections indicate a $182,792 favorable balance as compared to the forecast. Current year-to-date expenditures indicate a $621,114 favorable outcome as compared to the forecast. So our net potential impact, based on the previous 2 points, is $803,906 favorable outcome on our cash balance at 6/30/2023. If we move down a little bit. Here. So in general, our operating surplus would move to about $5.2 million for fiscal year 23, up from the initial estimate of $4.4 million, giving us an estimated general fund cash balance at 6/30/2023 of $67,580,907. Okay, looking at revenues, September FY23 compared to September FY22, you'll see a large increase here of about $3.1 million. This can be explained by the early receipt of the real property, homestead, and rollback funds from Cuyahoga County. This year we received it in September. Last year we received it in October. So you'll see the inverse effect on October's reports. Moving down to actual revenue July through September, FY22 compared to FY23. You'll see our revenues are up over this period, $4,178,274. Again, we can look back to the real property, homestead, and rollback early payment as a big driver of those funds. State revenue is up through this point due to the implementation of the Fair School Funding Program. In FY22, this didn't start until January, and this year obviously it started in July, so we're going to see that number continue to rise till about January, and then it's going to even itself out as we head down the back end of the school year. All other revenue is down, and that is mostly due to a shift in TIF revenue over to regular property tax due to the sale of the mall. Okay, so this gives us our initial forecast estimate versus 3 months actual cash flow and the remaining 9 months estimate. As you can see, we are about $26,000 up in state revenue. This is based on a final reconciliation of the state foundation report paid out in FY23 for FY22 that was not initially forecasted for. And then all other revenue is up about $156,000, and the main driver of this is our interest income. Our initial estimate was about $900,000, and we're trending to do over $1 million in interest for this fiscal year. Okay, expenses, September FY23 compared to September FY22. We're up about $116,682. The main driver of that is our salary and benefits, as per the negotiated agreement. We move up a step, so salary expenses go up yearly. With that, retirement's based on a percentage of your salary, so that's going to go up as well. Our benefits premiums, our medical benefit premiums are up about 8% for this year, and this can also have to do with additional staffing within the district. If we look at July through September, comparing FY23 to FY22, our salaries and benefits are up over this period for the same reasons as previously mentioned. Increased salaries expense, increased retirement benefits expense, our actual medical insurance premium increase of 8% and additional staffing. And the purchase services line is up about $666,000. And that's largely due to the purchase of instructional programs, a couple examples, Raz Kids, Lexia Learning, and Edmonton Courseware. Okay, comparing initial forecasted expenses to 3 months actual cash flow and then the 9-month estimated remaining for the fiscal year. We're actually trending down. For all of these, the difference in budgeted amount for salaries and benefits can be explained if we budgeted for family insurance and the employee opted to take single or no medical insurance. That could be a driver for this salary and benefits line. We're trending down compared to the forecast, which is good in purchase services and other expenses. But that could change as we move throughout the year as needs change. So we'll continue to monitor that moving forward. And that concludes the financial report for month ending September 30th, 2022. Are there any questions on that? Great. Okay. Item B, new funds for fiscal year 23. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the following new funds be approved for FY23. Fund 019, Other Grants, Special Cost Center 9903. This is a GPD Foundation grant for our secondary music. And Fund 300, District Managed Student Activities, Special Cost Center 9961. It's for the high school wrestling team. They previously have not had a student activities fund with the district and would like to start one. Moving on to item C, student activity program, budget purpose and goals for FY23, which can be found in Exhibit B. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the following student activity program, budget purpose and goals for FY23 be approved. This is for the high school wrestling fund that was previously mentioned. Fund 300, Special Cost Center 9961, in the amount of $3,500. Funds will be generated by fundraising activities. Moving on to item D, student activity program purpose goals and proposed budget revision for FY23, which can be found in Exhibit C. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the following student activities program budget, purpose, and goals revision for FY23 be approved. This is for Strongsville High School, the RAISE, Student Managed Student Activity Fund, and this is Fund 200, Special Cost Center 9932. Item E, transfer of funds. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the following transfer be approved and the 200 fund listed below be closed. The above fund that was mentioned, RAISE 200-9932, is transferring $779.38 to Fund 300-9922, which is MD Vocational, and they run the derby shop in the high school. RAISE was also known as Rachel's Challenge, popular in the past, and of late it's been inactive with little to no participation, so that's why they want to close down that fund. Item F is a grant approval. Be resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the following grant be approved for FY23. The grant, as previously mentioned, was the GPD Foundation Grant 0199903 in the amount of $12,000. Again, this is for high school and secondary music. With these funds, they plan to purchase a new concert tuba and an English horn hybrid. Any overages in the amount of the grant will be supplemented by the annual repair and replacement budget. Item G, amended permanent appropriations, be it resolved, which can be found in Exhibit D. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the amended permanent appropriations for FY23 be approved. Adjustment A is due to actual SCRS surcharge amount from our 006 Food Service Fund. Adjustment B is due to the GPD Foundation grant that we just spoke about. And adjustment C is due to revisions to student activities account, budget purpose, and goals that we've spoke about today as well. Item H, and my final item, is the tax advance schedule. Be resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the district participates in the Cuyahoga County Real Property Tax Advance Program. This includes requests for advances of all tax revenue collected in year 2023, which can be found in Exhibit E. This is an annual item that needs approved and submitted to the county for calendar year 2023. This resolution allows us to receive the tax collection from the county prior to the settlement dates. The advances take place in January, February, and July. The settlement dates are in March and August. With that, that concludes the treasurer's report. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Nick? Did you enjoy giving the treasurer's report?
I was nervous, but
you can think about your answer and send it to us at a later date.
absolutely.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is superintendent's report. Dr. Ryba.
Thank you, Mr. Mickel. I'm going to ask Aaron Green to come up with me as Nick exits the projector. We'll join on here. And I do have to say, Nick did a phenomenal job. I mean, it is. We talked earlier today. The first time you sit up here, it is nerve-wracking. You hear it, you see it, but I just want to tell you, Nick, you've done a phenomenal job here tonight, and I just want to commend Nick. There's been so many times since he's been here, some of his colleagues and staff here have sung his praises about how helpful he is, how he's willing to sit down and teach people new processes. So we've been blessed here to have a lot of assistant treasurers that have moved on to be treasurers, and we're hopeful that Nick will stick with us here for a little bit.
We're hoping that blessing stops.
That's right. Yeah. But he's got all the signs of a successful treasurer in the near future, and just want to commend you on a phenomenal job tonight. It's like you've been doing it for years. So with
Thanks,
that,
Dr. Ryba. I appreciate it.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Well deserved. With that, what we wanted to share, we shared a little teaser last meeting in terms of our state report card. We've done a press release, but Aaron's with me tonight, and our goal is to share. There's been major revisions to the state report card. Share what those revisions are and what they mean for our school district. Where are some successes to celebrate and some areas for growth? And so I'm going to turn it over to Aaron, who's going to get us started.
Sure, thank you. So as Dr. Ryba said, we just want to give a little insight into our district report card. This came out a few weeks ago. Every year from the Ohio Department of Education, they rank all of the districts and the school buildings, and it provides us a little snapshot into what we're doing as a district and as buildings. So while there's always room for growth, we're very proud of the results that we did receive, and we'll go into some detail here. Again, as Dr. Ryba said, there are some new components to the report card, both in the way that they're measured. So we used to have letter grades A through F. We've now changed to stars, which you will see, so 1 to 5 stars. While it may sound similar, the intent was the wording behind the stars. So if you see a C, typically we think, that's not amazing. But actually 3 stars is meeting the standard. So 3 is what we're aiming to get, and of course, as a district, we want 4s and 5s. I do want to recognize Dr. Ryba for his work on this. He was part of the State Report Card Committee. He spent a lot of time in Columbus doing this hard work, just to make sure that the report cards are a little bit more fair for all the districts, and that the changes put into place are going to help recognize, again, what's truly measured and valued in our district. The 6 components, I'm going to briefly speak of them, and then, as I said, we'll get into a little more detail. The achievement component has not changed a whole lot. The part that's different is we used to look at indicators of the test. So did we have 80% of our kids meet proficient? That's no longer taken into consideration. It's more about how did our students perform overall? What types of scores did they get? Our progress measure, this one looks at the growth of students. So are we growing students from year to year? Not just are they passing the test. We have early literacy, which looks at our K through 3 students. Are they on track each year to be proficient by 3rd grade? Gap closing, this one is another key component. Looking at our subgroups. Are we closing gaps? Are those subgroups of students making the gains they need to? We have graduation, which is relatively similar to how it's always been, with a 4th and a 5-year graduation rate. And then we have a readiness component, which is not measured this year, but in 24-25 it will be on the report card. This one is going to be a little bit more career-based. In the past it's been very college-heavy. So with that, I'll show you a quick preview here of the rating system. Part of the legislation was that we had to have descriptors of these stars. So as we said, if a 3-star is meeting the state standards, anything above then would be exceeding for 4 stars, and then 5 stars is significantly exceeding the state standards. So showing the level of success that we as a district are having, or districts and buildings across the state, based against the expectations of the standards. So we as a district, this is our district report card. You can see the stars are now visible. The top 3, we earned the 5 stars, or the highest ratings for the achievement, the progress, and the gap closing. Graduation, we have 4 stars, and early literacy, 4 stars as well. And as I said, the readiness component is not yet rated. If I had to value any of them over the others, I would lean toward achievement, progress, and gap closing. Not just because those are the ones we got 5 stars in, but those are the ones that are giving us a holistic look at our district. So are our kids achieving? Are we closing gaps? Are we growing kids? That's what we really want to look at. So I'm going to have Dr. Ryba talk first about achievement, and then we'll kind of switch back and forth about these.
So as Erin shared, achievement has changed up a little bit. That how many kids passed a test, did you hit that 80% benchmark, is something that we still report, but it's not measured because it really is not a good testament to the work we're doing to grow students. We have to understand, as we look across the entire state, there are some students that are not going to hit that benchmark of that passage rate, but the idea is, are they better this year than they were last year? And let's honor that, and that's what the performance index measure does. So the performance index measure, this is kind of what we see as a district report card. It takes a look at every student that took all of the tests. So what's in here is students that took the English language arts test in 3rd through 8th grade plus high school. The math test, the science test, the social studies test. They actually, students that decide not to take the state test but take an AP equivalent test, their scores are factored in here as well. And then it looks at a percentage of students. So if you can take a look at the first column are categories. So if you start at the bottom, that's untested. So that means we do have parents that opt out of testing, that they, for their own personal reasons, opt out. So that's saying we've had 0.8% of our students that should have taken a test, that didn't take a test. They assign points for that, which is 0 points. So that means we got 0 points for that percentage of kids. Then it goes when the kids take the test, just like you would take a test in any time. There's a scaled score, they call it, and that score is transferred to a range, and that range is given into these categories of limited is the lowest score you can get, all the way to really advanced is the highest, and we'll talk a little bit about advanced plus. So if you take a look at this, we had 8.6% of our kids score limited on their assessments. You get 0.3 points for that, so we earned 2.6 points for that group of students. And so limited and basic, if we want to consider proficient is the word we use for passing. The state sets a passing benchmark. So you could see in all the tests we gave across the district, if my math is correct real quick, that's about 18.5% of our students that did not hit that proficient mark. When you look above, proficient is that range of, okay, you passed and maybe a little bit above, and then you go into the levels of exceeding those proficient expectations. So accomplished and advanced plus. So if you take a look at the work we're doing as a district, again, if my math is around the right ballpark, you're looking at about 56% of our students that are achieving in the highest tiers of this measure. Now, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong. Advanced plus is saying we have students that achieved at that high level in a test or in a grade that is accelerated from where they should be. So if I'm a third grader and I was grade level accelerated and I'm in fourth grade and I'm taking a fourth grade test and I score advanced, I score at that advanced level. Or if I'm accelerated in the math pathway as well. So if I am taking an advanced math, I'm taking as a 7th or 8th grader Algebra 1, I score advanced, I get that advanced plus. So it's a little extra bonus point, I guess you could say, but 2.2% of our kids are achieving at that level. So as we take a look at this as a school district, some of the things that we say is, hey, we want to take a look and see, are those kids that are not hitting that passing mark, are we seeing growth and are we seeing improvement? And Aaron will talk about that next. Let's celebrate that we're seeing our kids achieve at a high level. Over half of our kids are hitting that top mark. So we're saying with what we're doing with the content, the knowledge, the work that they're able to do, they're able to apply that knowledge on the test. The other thing that they did, and this is just kind of a change to the report card that I think is a positive change, is they've changed the way it's measured. So how it was measured in the past is it was a simple math problem. What did you get? We got 98.1. That was the numerator. The denominator was 120. You would divide that, you'd see what percentage it was, and that would equate to the A, B, C, D, depending on the percentage. We advocated and got the change in legislation that 120 is a perfect score, which nobody has even come close to, right? So if you look at advanced is 1.2. You need 100% of your kids to achieve at the advanced level to get 120 points. So we said you're creating rules that are unfair and then we're getting penalized for it. So what they did and what we did is we are saying let's take the top 2% of districts that scored the highest in the state, and that becomes the denominator, right? And so that's what has helped to give a more accurate picture as to where we're at in relation to the state. And as I think Aaron put on a previous slide, that gave us 90, the top, that rate was 107.3 versus 91.5. So if you're looking at, hey, Strongsville City Schools, where do we want to aspire to improve? Then the top 2% of school districts in the state, their performance index was 107.3. Ours was 98.1, so about 9 points off of that. But that's kind of how they've done the measures to give an more accurate reflection of how we're performing compared to the state. And so that's the update on achievement. Any questions on achievement before Aaron updates us on progress?
I have a question. Do you happen to know, or is it easily accessible on the state website, which districts are the top 2%?
Yeah, so I have a presentation I could share with the board that has gone through these measures and looked at the data for how did districts percentage-wise from the 5 to 1 stars, as well as what were the top performing districts in those, so I can share those with you. Mm-hmm. Oh, and I forgot there was one more slide. We shared with you how we did as a district. All of these are also rated at the building level, so they'll take it for each of our buildings. So as you can see in this level, all of our buildings received either 5 stars or 4 stars, except our virtual academy, which received 2 stars. So That is one of the reasons why we've moved away from, especially at the elementary level, from the virtual academy. And we have our students back in school, except for secondary, that's still an option. But obviously that's a variety of factors, but wasn't seeing the achievement levels that we felt were in the best interest of our students from a virtual program. So, but altogether, our buildings are also performing very well. Again, looking at the terminology, exceeding or significantly exceeding state standards. So that's something to be celebrated at the building level as well. Progress.
All right. So progress has changed slightly from years past. It's still kind of our value added measure. So again, are we adding value year to year to kids? Or if they, achieve at a high level, can we still grow them? Or maybe they're not passing, but are we able to grow them year to year? So we're looking at this measure at particular groups of kids, and we take a state average of what they should gain based on what we're seeing, and we're looking at these groups of kids. Are they growing? So this is using all students. In the past, this measure used to break it down into subgroups, and we would look at each subgroup individually. Now it's holistic, all students. The other thing that changed is they've added a second piece to this. So it's not just growth, but we're also going to look at the effect size. So with this graph that you can see on the screen here, ideally, as we know, we want 5 stars, and that comes from having the high value added or the growth index as well as the effect size. And what the effect size does is tells us we're confident that they grew, but what was the magnitude of that growth? Did they get significant growth? Did they get moderate growth based on the evidence? So again, previously they just used the growth index. Now that we have the effect size, we can be even more confident of the amount of growth based on the evidence there. In the past, one of the reasons for changing this is we had a lot of districts fall in the A and F range. Now it's much more even between 1 and 5 stars, almost a true bell curve there. This is our district progress. So again, keeping in mind that there's those 2 components of it now. If you can see the colors there, the darkest gray is saying that students made more progress than expected, and there's significant evidence of that. So that's that effect size we're talking about. We see that in, overall we have all grade levels is the top row, and then we have 4th through 8th, and then high school is listed below holistically. The light blue there is moderate evidence that students made more progress than expected. The green is that there's evidence that they made more progress or made progress similar to what the expectation was. And then the red, there's significant evidence that students made less progress than expected. So this obviously causes us to take a second look at some of these colors. What's important to note is this is 1 year of data. So in years to come, it will become 2 years, then 3 years of data. Right now, we just have this 1 year because of the changes to the report card as well as the pandemic and all of the factors that played into it. So you'll see 4th grade, it looks a little bit concerning. What we want to do, though, is as a district, look into that a little bit further. We don't want to panic at this point, but we want to keep an eye on this. What's happening at that grade level and in those buildings, see if this becomes a trend, and if so, then we absolutely need to step in and make changes. We don't want to yet, like I said, jump in and say it's broken in 4th grade, but we do need to dig a little bit deeper. 7th grade math, this one's a little bit deceiving because when you get to 7th grade, this is the first year that we formally accelerate our students in math. So any student that is going to take an 8th grade math, they take the 8th grade test in 7th grade. Meaning all of the 7th grade students that are taking the 7th grade test are not our advanced kids. So they're not in advanced pre-algebra, they're not in algebra 1, they're not in geometry. So that's why, we're not seeing as much growth because those kids were in the cohort prior and now they jumped up to the 8th grade cohort. With the building results, again, we have some 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s there. And can I answer questions about that one? It's a little bit intense with the two different measures there.
Can you explain the 7th grade again?
Sure. So when students get to, in 6th grade math, it's just an honors math, so they're not formally accelerated. When they enter 7th grade, they have the option to be taking advanced pre-algebra, which formally accelerates them, which essentially says, you know, you're going to take the 8th grade test, you've jumped that year in math. Or they may jump into algebra. You know, very rarely we would have somebody in geometry. So the students that were 6th grade students, the whole cohort of 6th grade, we've taken, I'll say, half of them out, a third to a half. They've moved on to what's essentially an 8th grade level math. So from 6th to 7th, those 7th grade students that we're seeing here are not advanced kids, our general education or our lower performing in math at times students. So we're going to see a bigger gain in the 8th grade measure there for math.
So even if you would look at the number of kids tested, and let's just use a ballpark that 6th grade we test 300 kids in math, 8th grade we test 300 and some kids in math, you're going to see 7th grade we test 200 kids in math. Because you're taking the 100 best math students, and they're either taking the 8th grade test or they're taking the Algebra 1 test.
But they shouldn't be are they counted against 7th grade?
No. And so what you see in the data, if you even take a look at the achievement data, what you see is you see a dip in our achievement scores and you see a dip in our growth scores, because every grade up to that test is capturing all of our levels of math. You know, kids that are extremely talented in math, the kids that struggle in math, and everybody in between. 7th grade, I guess, puts plainly, is you're capturing just our kids that are at an average level to below average level in mathematics. 8th grade gets the advanced kids layered in, so it's just kind of that year. 7th grade is the year that the advanced math track skips.
How do we set the standard for what is expected?
Yeah, so I think Aaron and I have talked about this with Kim Scott, our math coach, as well, to say exactly that question. So one of the things, the data features that's on here is similar school districts. So how are we seeing and how are our kids performing compared to similar school districts? Because this would be a similar pattern and trend with others. So that's one of the data pieces that we could take a look at is, and what we're saying is we believe based on the data we've seen that we understand that it may not be at the same level of other, but this is showing trends that it's a little lower than it should be for our school district in terms of 7th grade. Would you agree? Yeah.
Can we apply that same, like, looking to other similar school districts to progress in the elementary schools? Because this is the outlier to me, right? Our middle and our high pulled up our elementary. So do we see, like, if you look at similar districts, do you see the same trends there, or are we the outlier?
Yeah, so one of the things that I would say as you look at the new report card, the one question that is being asked the most is, why are we seeing certain ratings for school districts at a higher level than the school buildings? One of the reasons is the way that they're measuring progress is two different methodologies for measurement between district and building. Like, for example, one of the things Aaron talked about was that effect size, which measures the magnitude of growth, right? How much growth is happening. At the district level, you have to hit 0.1 of effect size to move on that level. So if you take a look at, if you can see it from over there, but you could see that line is negative 0.1, that line to get to 5 stars is a positive 0.1. So if the value added index, which is how confident are we that this group of kids moved, if you're out like us, we were in this range over here, we were in this range and then we had an effect size of greater than 0.1. Well, at the building level, that effect size to get that higher star is 0.2. So the range is a little different at the building level. We're also seeing across the state that the stars and the ratings for schools are lower than districts. So this is something where the Ohio Department of Education goes and reviews and says, hey, we did simulations. Do these match the simulations? Are there adjustments that we need to be more reflective? But those are things, when we take a look at kind of the rating at schools, we can also drill down. There's a lot more data by schools that we could take a look at, and in terms of where we're seeing the different data points at the buildings. And you can also take, I got to look at, I'm not positive, Aaron, do they do the similar district ones with progress? I can't remember. You recall?
Yes.
They do? Okay. So yeah, we can kind of see that as well.
And one other piece is with that performance index that Dr. Ryba alluded to, when they take the top 2%, they do that for a district, and then they also do this for buildings. So that PI is not apples to apples. Community schools fall into the buildings. We have high schools, we have elementary schools, they all have different measures. So you have quite a span of performances at the building level.
The points on the splatter chart?
Yeah.
I don't know what you,
I think that is what it's
I
called.
think I nailed it.
Scatter plot, maybe?
Yes,
Scatter,
yes.
splatter.
It's got
mess.
something with an S. Are those students? Like, what are each of those dots?
Those are districts.
Oh, those are the districts.
Yeah, so these are, they did one, this is the graph from the state. So this is taking a look at the 607 school districts across the state. So you can kind of see where each of them rated. And they also have one of these for the buildings that we didn't put on the chart.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So again, what the state is saying is, if you do the measure correctly, you should have the most districts in that 3 stars range, right? Which the scatter plot kind of says that. And then it differentiates on the outside spectrum of there. Yeah. One of the, I guess the last thing I'll say on progress is, it's easy to understand conceptually. We're looking at, student was in point A last year. Where are they at point B this year? How the state measures it is extremely complex, and it's not a criticism, it's just a complex measurement. So the effect size is a way to help to be able to say, no, we're actually measuring student growth, and if you get above that 0.1, we are saying the kids in Strongsville City Schools are showing significant growth year to year, which is something to celebrate.
Is there a reason that they don't have kinder through third?
So we don't test, so growth is point A to point B, right? So we don't test with state tests in K to 2, and so third grade is the starting point.
Okay.
So that's why third grade isn't there, and fourth grade's the starting point, because third grade sets the benchmark for where they should be. And if you think of it this way, I can talk about this stuff forever and I'll stop. If you think of it this way, what they do each year is they take the kids' achievement scores, every kid in the state of Ohio, and if you would imagine that they line every kid in the state of Ohio from the lowest score to the highest score, and they group you in chunks of 20%. From the lowest scores, here's a group of kids in this they call them quintiles, this 20% quintile, this next 20%. And then when you take the test the next year, they're looking at where are you in relation to the group you were in last year. Did you move up? Did you stay the same? Did you move down? And so that's really what they're doing. They're measuring groups of kids. They're measuring you against the group you were in each year to see how you moved.
So what if you're in the top quintile to begin with?
Well, that's what becomes the challenge is what the state will say is there's no ceiling to this. There's always stretch. Kids are able to show growth. So you may not move into a new quintile, but within the group of kids you were grouped with, you may move a little further ahead of them, stay the same, or drop down a little bit.
So it does measure.
Yeah.
in the quintile.
Yes. Mm-hmm. All right, gap closing. We ready to move on to gap closing? So gap closing, again, puts both of these things together, and I completely agree with Aaron. As we take a look at a district, how are our kids achieving? Are they showing growth? And then this takes it and looks at, let's take a look not just at all kids, but let's look at a variety of student groups, whether that group is based on race, economic status, the language, English language, and a variety of factors. So this is another one where we spent a lot of time looking at in terms of how can we evolve this and celebrate the work we're doing with our kids. So again, what it does is it sets annual performance goals. So the state has said, we expect students in each of these groups to hit these certain marks, to hit these certain benchmarks. And if you hit that benchmark, great. There's points awarded to that. If you don't hit that benchmark, you don't earn those points. And you could see they're measuring it in English language arts and math. They're also measuring it in graduation. English learner, which is another test to look at how students are progressing that are not proficient in English. Chronic absenteeism, and gifted performance. So one of the things we've kind of not addressed is when you looked at the old progress measure, the progress measure had like 4 separate components to it. Those have all been kind of moved around. So there was progress of all students, progress of students with disabilities, progress of students that are gifted, and progress of students that scored in that lowest 20%. And we've put a lot of those in this area. So kind of taking a look at the measures. This is, again, these measures are replicated for the building level. But this is taking a look at the English language arts measure and math measure. The red dot, all these bars represent the different student groups. So again, these are the different student groups that are in Strongsville City Schools. You have to have a certain number of students to be considered a cohort. So what we're saying, when we take a look at our student groups, we have all students based on race, ethnicity. We have black, multiracial, Asian, Pacific Islander, Hispanic, and white. In terms, we have economically disadvantaged, we have students with disabilities, and we have English learner. So the part to celebrate is if you take a look at the red dot is the state saying, here's where we believe in 2022 kids in this student group should be achieving. That's their performance index score. So that red dot represents the performance index score that they should be achieving. So again, if you take a look at, I think this is Asian Pacific Islander, let's just ballpark it. They're saying they should be achieving at a performance index of upper 80s, low 90s. In our school district, their performance index was 104.8. So again, that's taking the basic, limited, proficient, accelerated, advanced plus. And you can go down the line and see that. We get a point for every one that we exceeded the red dot. So what is that, 9? So we got 9. There's 10 points possible. There's a group in there that we must not have.
Indian.
Yeah, well, thank you. Indian and Native American. So that we've got all the points there, and the same is true for math. So, you know, if you kind of keep in score, we got 100% of the possible points in achievement, which is to celebrate. So I think that's really cool to be able to say, it's not just a certain group that's carrying the achievement. It's all of our kids are hitting and exceeding the benchmark that the state is saying where they should be at this time. The next one takes a look at growth. So it takes a look at what Aaron said. And so this is a little bit of a difference, right? So that bar, that 2, is that measure that we talked about before, the growth index there, that, hey, we want our student groups to be able to show growth of at least of 2 or greater. And you could see in English language arts, when we break that down by student group, we're not seeing that they're hitting that mark. Math, we're doing a little bit better. So again, if you're totaling points, you're saying in the ELA side, we got 1 out of 9 total points. And on the math side, we've got 4 out of 9 total points. So this is something where we say as a district, when we take a look at growth, we've got to see, okay, they're achieving, but we're not seeing the level of progress year to year when we look at a student group level. They do the same thing by graduation rate. You'll see less. This is something to consider. This is what, 2021 graduation data? So graduation data is a couple years back. Everything else was 2022. This is the graduation cohort of 2021. So as you could see, there's only 6 student groups that had enough students in it in that 2021 graduating course. But all of the kids hit the benchmark in terms of their graduation rate. So that number there would be 96.2 is 96.2% of that demographic graduated. Is that correct, Aaron? Am I saying that? Yeah. And then the English learners, this is for OELPA. Is that the test? OELPA. There's a test of English language proficiency. Again, that's saying here's the mark of where English learners should be performing. We exceeded that mark that was there. The other parts that are there on the next slide are our gifted measures. So the gifted looks at three components, and I apologize, I should go back. Graduation is based on the number of demographic groups. English learners is 5 points, you either get it or you don't. Value added is 15 points. So they look at three categories. They take a look at value added. Did you meet are our students that are identified as gifted showing growth? We met that criteria, so we get 5 points there. They measure the performance index. So all our students identified as gifted, their performance index was 118. So if you take a look at 120 was max, they're scoring at that highest level. And we met that, so that's 10 out of 15 points. There's a very detailed rubric that takes a look at what level of students are receiving services, and we are not meeting that. So we got 10 out of 15 points for that. In terms of what that means, I'll just give you a simple example. We have students in the middle school take honors classes. If a student is identified as gifted in an honors class, they could technically be considered as being served. But the teachers teaching that honors class have had to have 15 hours of professional development, not just one of them, but all of them in that grade level, for that student to be counted as served. We'll talk later on what we're doing to try and bolster that up, but that's something where we have them served in terms of class placements in some areas, but we don't have the teacher professional development credential for the state to consider that as them being served. The last one that we
get the details on that?
Sure.
Just, I want to understand
Yeah.
what the 15 criteria are and what the 10 we got and what the 5 we didn't get.
Gotcha. Yes, we can do that. The chronic absenteeism one, that's not going to be, so this, by federal law, the state report card has to have a non-academic based measure. Years ago, they selected absenteeism. It wasn't rated this year. It's going to be rated next year as a 5-point criteria. Again, it has a goal. This year, the goal was 22.1%. As a school district, we were 12.8%. If you break that down, it's primarily, we're seeing that higher number based on the middle school and high school. And chronic absenteeism is a state-defined rate of absenteeism that we do absence intervention plans. There's criteria that we use. But you look at most of our elementary schools are single digits. The middle school and high school are in double digits. So it's something that we'll continue to focus on.
Do you know why that is? I mean,
just we have, well, there's a variety of factors. Our principals would be more apt to say, but we do have families that don't value as much getting their kids to school. In the district, we do have students that are unexcused, that will skip school or skip classes. And we do have families that the kid is home for, the student is home for a valid reason, but they don't call us. They don't, there's a reporting piece of it as well. Okay. Or there's a reason that's not one of the approved reasons for being there. So, that's some of the reasons that were there. Jenny, any other that you would think of? Okay.
Was 2021, 2022 a good benchmark year?
For us, or for
in general? I'm just talking about the pandemic.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll tell
No,
you, the state average was 30.2%, so it was high.
I'd like to understand the metric better, but anecdotally, I don't know if 2021, 2022 is a year I would measure absenteeism. Right. All that strenuously.
And and then gap closing, as we take a look at the buildings, you can see our buildings did very well, with the majority of them exceeding or significantly exceeding, and Chapman meeting the standard for that. So again, that's holistically, yes, there's work that we need to do at Chapman specifically, but our buildings are, as well as the district, supporting and seeing good results from our students in our student groups. And again, if you take a look at, and you can go on, when I say you can take a look, you can go online and go to the Ohio Department of Education, and you can look at all of these report cards and drill into the details as much. If you go to the buildings and you take a look at the gap closing, you'll see a lot fewer groups. just because you have to have, I think it's 20 or 15, 15 students in a group to be able to have a subgroup, and at the elementary buildings, just because of numbers, sometimes you don't hit that amount. Graduation.
All right, moving into graduation. This looks pretty similar to years past. You'll see that they configure a 4-year graduation rate and then a 5-year graduation rate. As Cameron said, these are years past because they need to get all the data collected, and they include summer graduations. So this is actually the 21 cohort that you're looking at. The graduation rate for 4 years was 95.5%, and 5 years was 94.8%. They do average those together. They weight the 4-year at 60% and the 5-year at 40%. And that's where we got the 95.2 weighted rate. When you align that to the state, not rubric, but chart, I guess I'll say, for lack of a better word, we would need a 96.5 in order to get the 5 stars. And again, we were at 95.2. They admit that this is a more aggressive measure than it has been in the past. We've usually always earned the A's. This number in the past would have been an A, but they're looking to increase this rate and get our kids graduating. Something to keep in mind, we talked, when you look at the actual number of kids this is affecting, so we have 4.8% of our kids in the 4- and 5-year graduation cohorts that aren't graduating on time. Something that they're doing now is they're doing some report out data as to why those kids, who are those kids, and why are they not graduating on time. So I pulled the numbers of that 21 class. There were 444 students. Of that, we had 424 that did graduate, meaning 20 kids we're talking about that did not graduate. So in looking at, I know it's pretty small on here, but you can look at the percentages. So we have, of those 4.8% of our kids, or we have 20 kids, we have about 6 of them that are still enrolled in high school, 2 of them that have disabilities enrolled in high school, 1.4, if you will, students with disabilities who did meet the requirements, but they're staying until they age out, and then about 10 students that actually dropped out. They're no longer in school. So while we don't want to lose any kids, keep in mind we're talking 10 kids out of 444. Now, can we do better? Yes, we're working toward that. We have some things going at the high school to ensure that we're getting kids credits and they're going to be able to meet the graduation requirements, passing the state tests. Moving into early literacy, again, similar to what we used to have, it's measuring our kids' grades K1, 2, and 3 in the reading area or literacy component. So we want to make sure that our kids are on track by 3rd grade to pass 3rd grade, because all the data shows that if they're not, then they're going to struggle essentially the rest of their lives. So looking at this measure, at first glance, that percentage doesn't look amazing, but look at, there's 3 components that go into this, and some of these serve us better. So the proficiency in 3rd grade reading, how many of our students in 3rd grade passed that 3rd grade test? And that is weighted at 40% of these 3 measures. We had 82.6% of our kids passing the 3rd grade test. That is up. I looked the prior year, we had 74%. So we made growth there. We're going to talk about it, but we're actually very high in this area compared to our comparable districts. Promotion to 4th grade, this one is a little skewed because they didn't have the retention component in last year. So all kids moved on to 4th grade. So that's 35% of this weight. So 100% of our kids. And the area in which we didn't do as well is improving our K-3 literacy. So this is 25% of that component. And this is where you see that 44.1% up here. So they look at what we call RIMPs, or Reading Improvement Monitoring Plans. How many of our students in the fall are not on grade level? And that's, again, grades K, 1, 2, and 3. We take those kids, we put them on intervention plans, we do our MTSS interventions, we progress monitor. Our goal is to get them on grade level. We look at them from year to year. So we had 399 students that started off track for the next at the next year, we had down to 176 that moved to on track. So again, that's not a number that we are happy with. Also, the state does realize that it's hard to close big gaps in a year. So we used to have a demotion for RIMPs. If you were on a RIMP and you didn't get off the RIMP, you would be demoted. They got rid of that. But again, we still need to look at what we're doing, and as we know, we're putting a lot of time and money and investment into our letters training, our early literacy training, and we really feel this is going to pay off, big dividends. Questions on that actual measure there?
So when I saw the numbers, I was thinking about the letters training.
Sure.
So it was a nice softball connection. When should we see the dividends? Is it reasonable to see them next year? Is it another year? What is our reasonable
Sure.
guess?
So last year we did one module of letters training, which was kind of dip the toe in the water. This year we're doing modules 2, 3, and 4. So that'll get us halfway through the letters training. I do expect that we'll start to implement some of these things in our classrooms and in our pedagogy and how we're teaching this year. I don't know that it's going to be an immediate payoff. I would say, should it get better next year with our MTSS coordinator and the interventions we're putting in place? Yes, but the true payoff I see as 2, 3 years out when these kids have been through K1, 2, 3 with our teachers who have been trained.
Is there any way it could backslide?
Any way that it could? I certainly hope not. The only thing would be if we identified more kids on RIPS. And, we have a targeted way in which we do so and follow the state guidelines. So I only see it getting better.
Okay.
I still feel, though, a lot of this, it's, in my belief system, it's skewed because of, like, a lot of these kids coming in. I just don't know how it's fair to judge anybody when, a kindergartner really didn't go to school full-time till they were in 2nd grade, so
Right.
I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, this makes total sense. And it's kind of unfair to say, it's a reasonable conclusion. So.
With the pandemic?
Yeah.
Referencing, yeah.
So,
Sure.
So when you're losing, to an adult, that might not seem like a lot, but to a kindergartner who doesn't really even understand school, and they're really just starting in 2nd grade, really, in my feeling.
Miss those 2 foundational critical
Yeah,
years.
that I feel like, I feel for those kids, like in 2 or 3 years, the other kids are going to start coming up and they're going to have what that group of kids, they should be the ones that we watch. Like the probably 1st through like 3rd graders or 4th graders that really didn't have that start. And I wonder how we're going to do that for them. Because the kids coming in a couple of years are going to have all that new stuff. These kids are never, what's going to be their safeguard? What's going to help them?
And I can say we are addressing that. We're not just,
Oh,
and you're
right.
not
Yeah.
alluding to this, we're not just
No.
passing them on. We're putting a lot of targeted interventions in place. The data meetings, looking at where they have those deficits and targeting, what exactly is the area. But you're exactly right. I mean, when you miss foundational year of kindergarten and learning letter names and letter sounds and,
Right.
that's hard to make up. But our teachers are doing a phenomenal job in putting that extra time and effort and interventions in place so that they can catch up.
Right. Oh, I know that. No reflection on you. I'm just making
Right.
a point.
Just as
that-
context,
Yeah.
this is, that measure, and it's not because it's a lower measure, but that is a measure that we advocated for multiple years to eliminate. For a variety of reasons. We felt strongly that we should measure how our kids are reading in K to 3. But the idea of having a binary measure of you either hit this benchmark at this period of time or not isn't an accurate reflection. So if you take a look at the number of students that are still off track, the amount of growth that those kids showed last year is something to be celebrated. Did they get to the part where it says they're exactly where they should be in September of 2nd grade? No. But my goodness, we closed the gap significantly And let's take a look at measuring that. Unfortunately, it didn't come out that way, but I appreciate your comments, Sharon, and I just want the board to know that when our building principals work in their team meetings for these kids and they're providing interventions, every couple weeks they're looking, and there's that trend line for where should this student be progressing and how are they progressing. And a lot of times they're meeting or exceeding that trend line. It's just their starting point is so far behind.
Right.
It's going to take a while for us to close that gap.
Okay, and the final measure is, again, not rated until 24-25 because we want to obtain more data, we being the state. So this is our readiness measure for college, career, workplace, and military. As I talked about earlier, the old measure was very convoluted and you got deductions. This is essentially, are our kids ready for life after high school? So instead of it being so heavily college-driven, we now have equal elements, looking at military, looking at apprenticeships, how are kids doing with earning the Ohio Means Job Seal and doing internships, and all of the components that will help even out, so we're not just looking at college-bound kids. So again, it's going to take some time to collect this information because it's essentially going to be after they graduate, getting some of these and following up with some of these kids. There will be 14 measures. What we have right now is the class of 21 and how they were prepared based on data that we had. So there's no stars, no measurement there, just kind of a report out at this point.
And it'll be interesting to see where this one goes. We've advocated for it's good to report it out, and it's good for us to take a look at, what percentage of our kids are doing what and how well. How do you measure that compared across the entire state when the values and the needs of a community are so different? So I think this is the one that there's going to be no measure for a while because they want to continue to study it and see, how do you put a level of stars when, Strongsville is so different than, another community that may have different needs and priorities for their kids. So in taking a look at, the report card, celebrations, next steps, what are some things that we think as we take a look at a report card, some themes, some trends that we saw? Obviously, we've talked about overall in a variety of different areas, we performed extremely well. We're in the top 5% of school districts around the state, and that's something to be proud of. As Aaron kind of alluded to earlier, when we take a look at comparable districts, so those similar districts, these are not just ones that, hey, we strategically pick out to make ourselves look great. The state has a metric that they use, and they say, here's the 20 similar districts that are most comparable to Strongsville. We were the only one district scored higher in that third grade ELA proficiency rate than we did as a school district. So again, I think that's something to celebrate, that hey, when you take a look at similar districts as Strongsville, we're doing very well amongst that group. As we take a look at what we're doing in terms of math, we're both seeing strong achievement and strong progress measures across the district, so those are things to celebrate. As well as if you break down, now we didn't show this data tonight, but if you take a look at the elementary, and we said, hey, for us 56% of the kids at the district are scoring at an advanced or accelerated level. It wasn't accelerated, they changed it, but whatever the top two terms were. Oh, it's right there, advanced and accelerated, I was right. So, but if you look at the elementary level, the elementary schools are even higher percentage scoring at that level. So that's showing at those foundational levels our kids are really having the knowledge and skills necessary to succeed. If you take a look at the growth measures by building, the middle school and high school are blowing it out of the water in terms of the amount of growth that they're seeing, and looking at those dark blue and light blue colors on the tested areas, they're showing more than expected growth in math, social studies, and science at the secondary level. Need to put some effort into or focus on the ELA. We're seeing good achievement there, but growth, they're just doing phenomenal work there. So things to celebrate and leverage those successes as we move forward.
And then looking at areas to continue to support. As you know, our plan that we have in place, it ties in nicely to where we're seeing our deficits. So one area that we already talked about, but early literacy and the letters training. We're in the midst of training all of our K-3 teachers and specialists with the letters 8 modules, which is going to tremendously assist our teachers and our kids in learning to read. Again, as Richard asked, we're looking probably 2-3 years out to really see the payout in test scores, if you will. Plus, those students don't test until 3rd grade, so there's a little bit of a backlog there. But absolutely, we're already seeing gains from that and some of the things that we've implemented. So we're going to stay the course with that. The second area that we're going to continue to support is our ELA growth. We just talked about, we need to make sure our subgroups are growing. We need to make sure all of our kids are growing. You know that our elementary curriculum supervisor, Amy Pinney, has put a ton of time and effort working with our ELA at the elementary school with the different strategies, with the on-grade level text, all of the science of reading going into that. And that's one of our really high focuses, priority focuses this year in the elementary buildings. So again, we're already seeing some growth that we've never seen at this point, and seeing work samples by our kindergarten and our 2nd grade students and all of the kids doing them that are just more than I could have expected of kids. It's really showing that it's working, these metacognitive strategies that the teachers are putting into place. The third area that we are going to continue to support, our ELA, again, our standards. We talked before about the rigor of the standards, and are we teaching at that level? Are we assessing at that level? Or are we teaching at a lower level and then the kids aren't able to perform on a test because that's not the level at which they were taught? So that is a huge focus at the secondary level. We're using our secondary literacy coach, Carol McKnight, as well as our secondary curriculum supervisor, Nicole Hackman. They're in the TBTs. They're working with their teams. We're looking at their common assessments. We're ensuring that everything is aligning. And again, we're starting to see gains. The area 4 with our instructional coaches, just overall, we've been blessed to have our literacy coaches at the elementary school, and our integration specialists, and our math coach, and our special ed coach. They may seem like ancillary roles, but I watch day in and day out what they're doing, and they are making huge impacts on teachers and students. So they're building that capacity. They're modeling, they're in the rooms co-teaching, they're working on strategies, they're in the TBTs. We're seeing a lot of payoff from that as well. And then the last one there that we're going to focus on, or continue to focus on, has to do with the gifted identification and served. So as we talked about, we're identifying the kids. We have the students in Strongsville, but we can't officially count them as served until our teachers have all received that 15 hours for 4 years in a row of high-quality professional development. So something our gifted coordinator has taken on. She started a cohort this year of teachers that were interested. We started it with interested K-12 teachers that want to do high-quality professional development in the area of gifted. So she is working with them. They are doing their 15 hours this year. It doesn't necessarily mean we can count these students in those classes as being served, because it's not equitable unless all of the teachers, as Cameron said, all 6th grade ELA teachers would need to have this. But we are doing that with all 6th grade ELA teachers. So these students that are identified in either Superior COG or ELA, they'll be counted as served. So yes, it's a measure of the report card, but it's more about growing our kids. Are we taking our highest performers and growing them? And that's what we need to continue to build. We can measure our at-risk kids. We have a lot of interventions in place. Our kids that are, general ed, maybe not the highest of the class, they're making gains. We're seeing good achievement. But we can't ignore our highest learners, highest achievers. And this is part of what she's working on. And she's going to continue this for multiple years to build these cohorts until we are trained and can serve these kids and meet the needs of our high learners.
And so what this means for us as a school district, we had a retreat, early in the end of the summer to talk about our district focus. And so I would ask that you reflect on our results, and we reflected on our results as well. And what we've said is the work and the plan we have in place is right where we need to be. There's nothing here that it's said like, oh my gosh, we've got to stop, or we're going in the wrong direction. When we take a look at, and Aaron's outlined it perfectly on this last slide, the work that we're doing in literacy and the new math adoption at the elementary level, the work on developing the formative assessments and the DOK and complexity of our standards and work across the district, but at the secondary level, all of this is leading to two things, which is how are we developing the knowledge and skills of our kids, but how are we developing better thinkers, better problem solvers that go beyond the test, right? The test is one measure, and we're seeing successes on it, but how do we take that rigorous content that our kids are getting, integrate it with the Model Mustang skills that we work on, and that gets to a level of deeper learning that's going to transcend beyond the report card. My view and my vision is if we do all of this stuff really well, the report card and the success on the report card is a byproduct of everything else that we're moving towards as a school district. So I think this just solidifies that we're doing the right work, we're doing good work as a school district. And I shared it internally, but I would like to repeat myself again tonight for anybody that may be watching, that the results of this report card and the results that we're seeing in our kids beyond the report card are about every person in our school district. And as I shared, we are blessed to have talented, hardworking, dedicated teachers that are willing to stretch themselves and put themselves and try something new and go through that process of learning to be better. To be in a high-achieving district, it's difficult to continue to push yourself to be better because we are being successful, but I see that on a daily basis from our teachers in the classrooms, our administrators that really put in a ton of energy and work to make this a reality and support and coach, right? It's not like we snap our fingers and say, hey, we want to teach metacognitive strategies, go make it happen, right? We've got a team of people that are supporting that and problem solving that on a classroom level. And you know, a lot of times our support staff is forgotten about in this work. But as I've said multiple times, you know, students are only as successful during the school days about how they feel coming into those doors. So from our bus drivers to our food service workers to our monitors and aides and support staff that are that welcoming environment that provide that support, from our office support staff folks and our custodians and maintenance and tech folks that make everything work and go. All of those pieces, parts. It may not be teaching the math or the social studies or science, but if that environment is not where it needs to be or the resources aren't there, it doesn't all work. So, it's a celebration of the work that we've done as an entire team. And so I'm excited about it, but I'm also excited about the next steps to get even better tomorrow than we were yesterday. So that kind of, Erin, any other things you want to share?
Thank you.
All right, well, that wraps it up for us, unless there's any other questions, or, you know, I've got a few things that we would like some more information on that you've shared throughout that I'll be more than happy to do that, but any other questions or feedback you have for us?
I just have one more question, Erin, to go
Yeah.
back to number 5 here. Sure. How many teachers did you have volunteer for that first cohort with the gifted coordinator?
We're at about 30.
Oh, that's a
So,
lot.
and again, that's completely on their own time, you know, spending their own summers, some of them, and then throughout the school year as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Cameron or Aaron? On behalf of the board, I just want to thank everyone. It's great news. The new report card, I think, is a better tool than the old report card. I kind of I personally look at the report card kind of with two lenses. You know, one is just that competitive lens, you know, and I think we should be proud of the fact that we're 69 out of 607. That's great, you know. It says that it identifies the things that we're doing well in our district. Our parents should know that as far as the district is concerned, there's no reason they should be worried about any of their children going to Strongsville schools and not being in a school that child can achieve at whatever level that child is at. So 69 is great, and the competitive in all of us will want to see it go to. I'll challenge Cameron for a prediction later. But the other thing the other lens I like to look at is more like the annual checkup, and it gives a good overall view of the health of what we're doing as a school district, and it also identifies the things that we can do better. You know, if it's the annual checkup, you know, you're doing well here, but the cholesterol, let's work on getting that under control, or perhaps that's too much information. But it's that idea, and so I think it's helpful to be able to say, you know, these are the things that we need to concentrate on, these are the things we want to continue to do well. We don't want to backslide on, but it helps us have that diagnostic tool. And I wanted to give the congratulations to Cameron, because I don't think the old report card was as good of a diagnostic tool as it is now. It's always going to be a test, but I think it has more meaning, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you for allowing us to share the results and have that conversation, and thank you, Aaron, for all the work you put into that for us tonight. One more item for your consideration under my report is the approval of a final agreement with the Strongsville Education Association. On February 20th, 2020, the Strongsville City Schools Board of Education ratified a 3-year contract extension with the SEA effective August 1st, 2020 through July 31st, 2023. To implement that agreement, a new negotiated agreement document was prepared in collaboration with SEA representatives, which incorporates all previously approved memoranda of understanding as well as new wage schedules consistent with the board's prior approval and other language corrections and changes agreed upon by the parties. Accordingly, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Strongsville City School Board of Education approves the new SEA agreement document in effect from August 1st, 2020 through July 31st, 2023.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Hausum, second by Ms. Stavcek. Any discussion? I will say that this is a good thing to be able to vote on. It means we continue to do our job and work in collaboration with our teachers. And it's nice to do these kind of administrative things and be able to collect everything together. Mr. Mancini, take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stovcek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Kilbane,
Yes.
and Mr. Micko.
Yes, and the motion carries.
Under Business Services, the first item, be resolved upon my recommendation that the board approves participation in the Ohio Schools Council bus bidding and purchasing program and authorizes the Ohio School Council to advertise on the board's behalf as per the specifications submitted for the purchase of 3 72-passenger conventional school buses, chassis and bodies, and 1 transport van.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stovcek. Any discussion? Any POs or anything else that need to get sent immediately will get sent immediately.
Yep.
Take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stovcek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Kilbane,
Yes.
and Mr. Micko.
Yes, and the motion carries.
Number 2, be resolved upon my recommendation that the schedule of rental fees for direct and indirect costs be approved as it appears in Exhibit F. There's no changes from the previous year's rental fees. Number 3, LED lights, be resolved upon my recommendation that the operations manager be authorized to purchase LED lights for Strongsville High School and Middle School hallways from LED Lighting IQ in the amount of $36,490. Funding from the Permanent Improvement Fund and as found in Exhibit G.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stovcek. Any discussion? Let there be light. Take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stovcek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Kilbane,
Yes.
and Mr. Micko.
Yes, and the motion carries.
We also have a few gifts. Thank you to Cicely Andrews, who donated $170 to Ms. Naples' classroom at Kinsner to assist students during the school book fair, and the remainder will be used for classroom supplies and materials, as well as Books A Million at South Park. They always hold an annual drive to benefit the district. 9 totes of books were delivered, valued at $3,718 that are going to be divided among the schools in the district. And Russell and Anita Rofer donated 8 new drumsticks to Kinsner Elementary School band program. So we appreciate all of those donations. Next, I'll ask Aaron to come back up with the curriculum report for the month.
3 items tonight for your consideration. Item 1 is a revision from the June 30th meeting, and this is just a correction to the grade 6 physical education fee. It'll now include a lock for each student's locker in gym class. It was omitted inadvertently, and that's Exhibit H. Item 2 is a trip to Germany, Austria, and Switzerland for our German students, and that is taking place June 17th through 25th of 2024. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, permission be granted to Strongsville High School German teacher Patrick Allen to travel with the German students. Expenses will be paid by participating students, and as always, if necessary, the trip may be postponed or the destination changed depending on world events at the time. Lastly, we have an out-of-state trip for our high school boys varsity basketball team. They are traveling to Florida to participate in a tournament December 26th through 30th of 2022. Transportation via commercial airline, expenses paid by participating athletes and Strongsville Basketball League.
Thank you, Aaron. We do not have any items under student services. And next, I'll turn it over to Jenny for the human resource report.
Thank you. Under Human Resources this evening, I have the following items for your consideration. Under E1, resignations for non-certificated staff. Under E2, retirements for non-certificated staff. Under E3, appointments for non-certificated staff. Appointments for certificated staff. Continuing appointments for non-certificated athletic supplemental contracts. Appointments for home instruction tutors, appointments for certificated substitutes, appointments for non-certificated substitutes, appointment for certificated supplemental contract prorated. Under E4, changes in status for non-certificated staff. Under E5, changes in hours for non-certificated staff. Under E6, educational upgrades. And under E7, we have our stipends for our resident educator mentors. Under E8, medical leave for leadership and medical leaves for certificated staff, as well as medical leaves for non-certificated staff. E9, unpaid leaves for non-certificated staff. E10, volunteers for chaperones and 1 volunteer coach. And under E11, we do have a correction to the agenda from September 22nd. We had to correct the number of days for those 2 employees. And under E12, we have a memorandum of understanding. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the memorandum of understanding between the Strongsville Board of Education and the Ohio Association of Public School Employees, as stated in the exhibit, be accepted. And this is Exhibit I and does require a vote.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Towson, second by Mrs. Stavcek. Any discussion? We've all read it. We'll find out if we're all in agreement. Please take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stovcek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Kilbane,
Yes.
and Mr. Miko.
Yes, and we are in agreement, and the motion carries.
Thank you. And under E13, we have another memorandum of understanding. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the memorandum of understanding between the Strongsville Board of Education and the Strongsville Education Association, as stated in the exhibit, be accepted. Exhibit J.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Mrs. Stavcek. Any discussion? We've all read it. Nick, take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stovcek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Kilbane,
Yes.
and Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries.
There are no other items under technology, so that concludes my report.
Any other questions for Karen? Next is our consent calendar. Action by the Board of Education and adoption of the consent calendar at this point in the agenda means all items appearing with asterisks are adopted by a single motion unless requested otherwise. Do I have any otherwise? I do not remember having any corrections, so the minutes or the agenda stands as it is. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stavcek. Any discussion? Nick, take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stovcek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Kilbane,
Yes.
and Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries. Board of Education Other, be it resolved that the Strongsville School Boards of Education approve the addition of a new member, Hillary Yankello, to the Board Facilities Committee. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stavcek. Any discussion? Just want to thank Hillary for her time volunteering, and this is our opportunity to get a little press out that we are actively seeking new members for the Board Facilities Committee. We are seriously looking at our elementary schools, and this is one of the vehicles that will help us do that. So any citizens in the community that are interested, please come to a Board Facilities Committee meeting. The next one will be next Thursday, the
6:30 at Chapman.
6:30 at Chapman Elementary. Those meetings are open to the public, but to be on the committee, you become a voting member of the committee, and you get the honor of getting voted on at a board meeting. Nick, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stovcek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilbane,
Yes.
and Mr. Miko.
Yes, the motion carries, and congratulations to Mrs. Yankello. We do not have need for executive session. But, I apologize, we have a Board of Education other.
Oh, yes. Tracy Davidson, counselor at the high school, social worker Kristen, and Bill Wingler took a total of 27 students to the Kevin Love Mental Health Summit at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse this past Monday. It was October 10th, which happened to be World Mental Health Day. I was supposed to attend with them, but I had an emergency with a dog at home, so I was unable to go. The summit had 15 districts, 500 kids total. Each kid was allowed to participate in 3 different sessions. There were 15 different topics to choose from. There was a speaker from Youth to Youth. There's also a speaker from CODA, which is Coexisting Disorder Awareness, who is a mom, and she had lost her son. It talked about the hand-in-hand of mental health and substance abuse, one leading to the other, or substance abuse leading to then mental health diagnoses. 2 of the big things that they talked about with the students were identifying a trusted adult. That was the big thing they spoke about in every single session, along with noticing signs of suicide and being there as advocates for your fellow students. Kevin Love provided SEL curriculum free of charge to all the districts who attended, which was very nice. And he was very candid and open about his mental health struggles starting in middle school and high school, as well as his 2017 public panic attack that led for him to be such an advocate for such things, and how 1 in 4 people will be diagnosed or have some sort of mental health issues within their lifetime. All of the kids and supervisors who attended were invited to participate in viewing a preseason game that evening, but things changed a little bit. Initially, everyone was allowed to hang out there and then go to the preseason game, but then they said, hey, from 4:30 to 6, you guys need to go walk around Cleveland and figure out something to do and then come back for the game. And our very wise staff decided it was not a good idea to wander around downtown Cleveland at 4:30 to 6 o'clock with 27 high school students, and decided kids got their tickets, came home, went with their parents and guardians to the game. We plan to do this in the future for years to come, whether it's going to be new students or the same students going year to year and then replacing the freshmen. They're not really sure how they're going to build upon that. And the way that the kids were nominated is that students and teachers went through Google Classroom to nominate students that they felt comfortable with, that they felt were a good addition to doing this. And everybody seems very excited about it in terms of the opportunity that was provided. Tracy Davidson was through the roof excited to be able to bring this opportunity to the students. And I think it's really great to see that our staff are so committed to things outside of just the classroom, but to dedicating their time to something as important as mental health awareness. And that is my other.
Well said, and congratulations to everyone involved. Are there any others? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Mrs. Kilbane. An enthusiastic second, I might add. Any discussion? Please take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mrs. Kilbane,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mr. Miko,
Yes,
and Ms. Stovcek.
Yes.
the motion carries. It is 8:35, and we are adjourned. Thank you for your attention, and have a nice evening.